Well, welcome back. It is after Halloween. I ran out of time. I tried so hard to get this done before Halloween. I am recording this before Halloween, but unfortunately I didn't have time to edit and get it up. So what we're going to be doing here is I'm going to rapidly to you guys get the inside painted and paneled, and then we'll work on room layout. So I'm going to speed through that real quick so you can see what I'm doing there. So I had promised when I was going to do this build that I would also tell a ghost story. Now I know it's after Halloween, but I still have a ghost story for you guys. So this is about a location in Minnesota. It is called the Joseph Librant Forepaugh Mansion. It is a 3-story palace-like Victorian mansion that was built at the cost of $10,000 to showcase Joseph's personal wealth. It's 8,500 square feet of interior floor plans that have both the historical beauty of its original 1870 structure and the added features and renovations that make it a great place to establish a commercial venture. It is listed on the National Register of Historical Places. The NRHP describes it as a 2-story frame bracketed Italianate structure, though it started out as a 1870 Victorian-style home. The rear addition is described as being unusual. It is a 2 1/2-story mansard section with differing wall heights from the original front section. Historic mansions can become historical because house museums can be renovated to serve the tastes and desires of their homeowners. Much of the interior has been restored by the Taher family. The common rooms with 15-foot ceilings and fireplaces were on the first floor, including the parlor, the living room, the dining room, the study, and the library. A kitchen and bathroom plus other needed rooms were later added on. There was also a custom-built wine cellar. The second floor had the family's bedroom and sitting area. Bathrooms with plumbing were probably added later. The third floor had the ballroom, banquet area, and smaller rooms for a live-in staff. There's probably a kitchen and refrigerator built somewhere on the third floor for the convenience of the event staff. Nice touches included the small covered porches, lovely bay windows overlooking the park, and the beautifully landscaped grounds and gardens. It has been used as a commercial establishment, such as a French restaurant. A commercial kitchen was added, and the veranda was reinforced so it could safely hold tables and chairs for guests, providing beautiful rooftop seating overlooking the St. Paul skyline. The mansion's reception and banquet space was located on the third-floor ballroom. After the interior was restored to its original splendor, it was an awesome experience to have a meal inside one of the rooms. It was as if you were a guest. The experience of having a small wedding reception or banquet there must have been special too. The restaurant closed in 2019 because the chef died and the business had been slow. It sat vacant with all of its antique furniture still in the rooms. In 2023, it was taken off the real estate market, perhaps because a buyer was found. Someone wanted to lease it, or because the owners have thought of another venture to start themselves. It is a beautiful structure, and was full of life once, and can be again. All right, so that's kind of the what the house looks like now. It said the history of this house. Entrepreneur Joseph made his fortune in the dry goods business and was senior partner in the J.L. Forepaugh Justice and Company. That eventually became the St. Paul department store chain. Field Schlick Forepaugh was also the founder and partner in Forepaugh and Torbox, a major boot and shoe manufacturer in the mid and far west. It's actually as I can tell you as a Minnesotan, these shoes are kind of famous in the area. By 1870, Joseph had money to spend and bought 5 lots of land. In the center of it, he built an extravagant Victorian Italianate mansion with a basement, 3 floors, and beautifully landscaped grounds and gardens for his family. His wife Mary and their 2 daughters moved into a residence filled with the highest quality, finely crafted room furnishings. Along with the fine living, Joseph hired servants as well, but he made the mistake of having an affair with a young maid, Molly. When Mary, Joseph's wife, caught them in bed, she asked Joseph to end it, and he did. In 1885, when Molly realized she was pregnant, she hung herself in a third-floor room by tying a rope to a chandelier and throwing herself out the window. This suicide ruined life for all of this mansion. In 1886, Joseph sold his mansion to Civil War veteran General John Henry Hammond, while Joseph and his family went to live in Europe. Joseph also sought to mend the problems in his marriage caused by the affair and reestablish ties with his wife. They came back to the States in 1889 and built another palace-like mansion at 302 Summit Avenue, which had a glorious view of the first mansion and the city as well. However, in 1892, Joseph had sunk into a deep depression. Though he said he was worried about his business, which was doing fine, he really was mourning Molly's death. He shot himself in the park, killing himself. Many people have owned this mansion over the years, most of whom took the responsibility of its maintenance very seriously. However, during the 1950s, like many other historic homes, the mansion was subdivided into low-income apartments, which didn't bring in much money to maintain the structure, and it was neglected. By the 1970s, the mansion was in need of some tender loving care, and it was put back onto the market as is. In 1975, the Brewster family bought it and began the long process of renovating and restoring the mansion to its former glory. The mansion needed to earn its keep, so it became a fresh restaurant in 1976, much to the benefit of the people of St. Paul, who got to enjoy its ambiance in the interior rooms and the glorious view seen while dining on the outside eating areas, all while enjoying French entrees. In 2019, a master chef who created all the great recipes for 5 years died from the flu, deeply affecting not only the owners, but the 50 employees. The Tuher family decided to close the restaurant and try to sell or lease it to another entrepreneur. After 4 years of being for sale, the owners decided to take it off the market, with perhaps another idea of how to put the historic building back to work. The manifestations, they say that this place being haunted, you can see Molly and Joseph living their afterlives together. Maybe. The spirit of Joseph, his spirit is always dressed formally in an 1890 suit and attire and has become once more the master and host. He is really pleased with the completed renovation and restoration work done on his mansion, I'm sure. His spirit appears without fear in solid form, looking very much alive. He's very friendly and has been seen by customers and staff as he walks through the dining rooms in formal dress, looking pleased with the attitude that he owns the place. He likes all the social events as well, which remind him of his life here. Perhaps his daughters were married in this mansion. The spirit of Molly. Molly has been seen and heard near the area where she killed herself. Her spirit goes about her afterlife trying to do what she did while alive. She would like to be employed as a server. Would she? Would she really? During a reception where all the waitresses were dressed in 19th century dresses, a woman, similarly dressed but unlike the other employees, was seen gliding down the hall by staff before she melted into a wall. Employees opening up the restaurant heard a distinct tromping on the third floor, the traditional living quarters of servants. The police were called and they brought a canine dog to investigate. The dog refused to go up to the third floor, but finally did after some persuasive coaxing. The tromping stopped and no one living was found. Molly is a sociable ghost. She likes to sometimes attend weddings and receptions with the spirit of Joseph. The restaurant has a famous wedding picture which captured her image. In the basement, lights turn on and off by themselves. The living field cold cheers and hears strange noises. Perhaps the basement is the old love nest for Molly and Joseph. The mansion has been well known for being haunted, especially during its years as the restaurant. The two spirits were very happy and create a positive aura, making it the perfect place for people. Molly and Joseph are both very friendly and taken an interest in the restaurant and its activities, appearing in front of many people. And that is foretold by hauntedhouses.com. All right, the second haunted location I have is the mix of narcissist, betrayal, and murders resulting in an ugly end, but apparently a pleasant afterlife. And it's about the Glensheen Mansion and the Cogden Estate. The estate is a beautiful living history lesson, from the original furniture and portraits of previous inhabitants to the immaculate grounds and gardens. The carriage house and stable structure is long and quite big. It has 8 stalls for horses and an area for a dairy cow or two, a garage and a garage area. Living quarters for workers are located here too. The Cogden family enjoyed spending time together outside as well as inside. There's a tennis court, a swimming pool, a lot of pathways to travel down, flower beds, a truly beautiful garden. And the history of this place, is the history of this estate and family, begins with its patriarch, Chester. He was born in 1853, the son of a Methodist minister. In one awful month in 1868, 3 of Chester's siblings died of scarlet fever, and his father died of pneumonia. At 15, Chester became the man of the house and took his responsibilities very seriously. His mover and shaker abilities got off to an early start, propelling him from one goal to another. Family was his most important responsibility, but he also needed to strive to become successful. He made the best of it and found a path to travel by going forward in positive steps to help support his family and his own future as well, both working and studying to finish school. While he got accepted into an expensive college, Yale, he decided instead to attend a more reasonable priced Syracuse University, which would also allow him to be closer to his mother. He worked to put himself through school and was able to send money for the family farm mortgage and contribute to the family budget. Chester found the love of his life, Clara Bannister, in a Syracuse University math class during their freshman year. Clara was also a Methodist preacher's kid. After they both graduated top of their class in 1875, they postponed their marriage until Chester could get established in a great job. Clara got a job in teaching while Chester studied law with a legal firm. After passing the Minnesota bar, Chester was hired to be the assistant of the Minnesota United States Attorney. Chester and Clara were married in Syracuse on September 29, 1881. 5 children later, the family moved to Duluth when Chester set up a law partnership with an old boss, William Bilson, becoming Bilson and Congdon. They became well known for their success in civil litigation. Chester was on his way to monetary success when he became the chief counsel for the Olive Iron Mining Company. He educated himself on iron ore properties and made his first fortune at 48, after buying land full of low-grade ore. He was on his way to becoming extremely wealthy. His family was his first priority. Chester and Claire decided to build their forever home, choosing 14 acres in a beautiful area next to Lake Superior, with land for vegetable gardens, flowers, animals, and recreation, and lots of room for the children to grow up. The goal was to be self-sufficient, growing most of their own food. From 1905 to 1907, Chester and Clara built their dream home, Glensham, and their new estate. It took 4 years to build it using top-notch people: architect Clarence H. Johnston, a top interior designer William A. French. French found furnishings from around the world, as well as having handcrafted woodwork, gold leaf, and silk wallpaper throughout the mansion. Given the times in which they lived, Chester and Clara were very fortunate that they lost only one child, drawn to disease, leaving them with 6 healthy children. The Congdons' first priority was their 6 children, who grew up to be exceptional citizens who were dedicated to their families. Chester and Claire expected their children to make the best of their educational opportunities and apply themselves to do the best that they could, so that they could be prepared to succeed in life. They would strive to be successful on their own, according to their interests, for the benefits of their families and society at large. They instilled in them the idea that nothing is accomplished with negative thinking and giving up when life doesn't go your way. Uncontrollable self-made circumstances can create bumps in the road. The challenge of life is to lean on your faith in God and find ways to make the best of every situation you find yourself in and work through it with a positive goal. 5 of their children finished college, working in professions, raising the next generation, and volunteering for charity events and organizations. Being human, they had their weaknesses, but did the best that they could in life. Chester and Clara were exceptional examples of their own teachings. Besides being a lawyer and investor, Chester also served 2 terms in the Minnesota House of Representatives. Chester also donated the money for the state to buy the coast along Lake Superior so it can be enjoyed by the public for years to come. Clara became involved with charity organizations, outreach activities, and strongly supported the Duluth Methodist Church. When Chester died in 1915, she continued on with her life despite her loss. Their youngest daughter, Elizabeth, was on her first year of college when her father died. She decided to drop out of college and come stay with her mother. Elizabeth was never interested in getting married, but she fully involved with charitable organizations. She spent the rest of her life at Glensham Mansion. Her social life consisted of activities with her 2 girlfriends, such as traveling together on trips. Feeling the need to have a family, Clara went on a trip down south and came back with a baby girl, who she named Marjorie after her sister. From a very young age, Marjorie was a strong-willed, determined rebel. It didn't help that she had a poor eyesight and had to wear thick glasses. She was a handful from the beginning, and Elizabeth didn't know how to handle her. Breaking away from the Cogden family values, Elizabeth would give gifts to Marjorie to get her to stop her temper tantrums. This started Marjorie's pathological need to spend all the money she could get a hold of, which in turn fueled her sociopathic mindset. She was formally diagnosed as a sociopath when she was 10. She had no empathy for others and only thought of herself. As a child, she needed therapy, strong guidelines and follow-through from her mom, and the support from other Cogden family members. While her uncle Robert tried to be a good male influence, Marjorie didn't like him because he advised Elizabeth not to give in to her and practice tough love. She also felt rejected by her birth mother, wondering why she gave her away. She never felt like part of the Cogden family clan because her behavior rubbed a lot of relatives the wrong way, and because she didn't want to belong. Despite her issues with Marjorie, Elizabeth went away and came back with a second baby. 3-year-old Marjorie wasn't pleased at all, and her rebellious nature and troubling behavior became much worse due to her jealousy. Her sister Jennifer was not only pretty, but had a very outgoing personality, making her popular with everyone. The sisters never liked each other. Despite her issues, Marjorie enjoyed the holidays, her mom's love and attention, and all the activities available at Glensham and the beauty of the mansion. She had a blessed life, despite her problems. Both daughters did well in school, were avid readers, and went to college. Elizabeth saw both of them married to good men, and each had a family. So far, so good, according to the family tradition. Long before Elizabeth's stroke, she suffered in her mid-80s. She knew that her family couldn't afford to maintain Glensham, and fearing that they would have to sell, she came up with a plan. In 1968, she made a deal with nearby Duluth University to be the new owners and open it in the state up for the public to enjoy. Glensham would become a house museum to be presented, just as the Cogdens liked it. The university allowed Elizabeth to spend the rest of her life in Glensham, as they wouldn't take possession of the property until she died. Unlike someone else, they could be patient and wait. Elizabeth suffered a stroke which left her at first unable to walk, talk, or write, or eat by herself. On top of her diabetes to deal with, like the trooper she was, she didn't wallow in despair, but instead worked hard in therapy to be able to relearn how to eat by herself, write with her hand, and could take a couple of steps at a time with a walker. Elizabeth was able to stay at Glensham because she had around-the-clock care from a skilled nursing and house staff, both dedicated to looking after her welfare. Meanwhile, Marjorie was in for a world of hurt because she brought her issues to her marriage. Her husband hung in there until all of her children were grown and out of the house. He then divorced her because of her ever-growing need to spend money and her very self-centered will and demeanor, always demanding her own way. This temporarily destroyed her, and she wound up in a mental hospital for a brief time. She did get some therapy, and that helped, but she should have continued getting help with her issues. Instead, she decided that her husband could only hurt her, so she wouldn't marry for love, and only for the opportunity to use them. Once she was released, Marjorie continued to spend every penny she could get her hands on, and found herself penniless most of the time. Chester and Clara Cogden's teachings were taken by heart, but twisted in a way that fed her spinning addiction and crime sprees that eventually included murder. She married someone completely opposite from her first husband, a drunk by the name of Roger Cadwell, who was as broke as well. Yes, they turned out to be a couple from hell. Marjorie had long spent her trust money, and she and Roger were living in a trailer in Arizona. She would call Elizabeth, trying to get another infusion of funds. Elizabeth would always give her money. The staff got wind of this, and the house manager started to screen Marjorie's calls for money, stopping the flow of funds as Elizabeth wasn't told of Marjorie's requests. Marjorie became frustrated and amped it up to a level of attempted murder. When Elizabeth first had her stroke, Marjorie came to visit and fed Elizabeth some homemade sugar-free marmalade that had sedatives in it, trying to kill her so she could get the $4 million cash inheritance that she was set to receive. Her plot failed, and the consequences of having access to her mom was severely curtailed. They didn't call the police on her. Marjorie came up with a plan to get around the roadblocks to get what she wanted. She signed a promissory note to her husband Roger that she would give him $2.4 million in her cash inheritance. On the night of the murders, Elizabeth's night nurse was sick, so the house manager called Elizabeth's recent retired nurse, Velma, to come just for the night. Velma's husband had a bad feeling about it and pleaded her not to go. Velma missed Elizabeth and went despite his protests. Marjorie's plan was put into effect when Roger Caldwell took a plane to Duluth and broke into the Glensham through the back door. He met Velma on the central staircase and struck her 23 times with a candlestick. He put her body on a windowsill bench. He moved into Elizabeth's room and smothered her with a satin pillow. He helped himself to jewelry, following Marjorie's shopping list, being sure to take the ring that Marjorie especially wanted. He took 2 rare coins which he planned to mail to himself. I found the horror of blood and death and called the police. Mistakes were made by the police and some evidence was compromised, but after gathering other strong evidence, Roger was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 2 life terms. Marjorie showed no support for him as she didn't come to the trials. She never paid him the money she promised. Marjorie was arrested as the main planner of this awful event. Her trial was a circus. A combination of things got her off. She convinced the jury that she couldn't have murdered her mother by showing them her kind heart in court. She brought her attorney a cake for his birthday. She talked to the prosecutor about contributing to a charity. She also knitted during the trial. Marjorie was also a very talented defense attorney who pointed out the flaws in the prosecution's case, such as the contaminated murder scene and the fact that the police never followed up on other suspects. She was found not guilty. Because of evidence brought out at Marjorie's trial, Roger was given a new trial after serving 5 years. He was offered a deal. If he confessed to the murders, he would go free on the time already served. He lasted 5 more years before he killed himself. Or did he? He was a loose end that may have been taken care of. His suicide note claimed he didn't murder Elizabeth and Velma. If this note is to be believed, who did kill them? When Roger was still in prison, Marjorie married again for the 3rd time to a man who supported her during her trial. After his wife mysteriously died, she wasn't divorced from Roger. Marjorie's screaming to get what she wanted continued. When her 3rd husband died suddenly, the coroner found sedatives in his stomach, which did point the finger to her. She narrowly escaped arrest for his death because she convinced the police that she and her husband had a suicide pact, but she chickened out. She was, however, convicted of arson in 1984 and spent 12 years in prison. Marjorie was a model prisoner while incarcerated, which means she could be sociable when it suited her. She got along well with the other women and guards and taught the women how to knit. She was away from her addiction and her freedom to plot was curtailed. After she was released in 2004, she went back to her old ways. In 2007, she was arrested again after being caught red-handed in a forgery scheme that involved theft, fraud, and computer tampering. Because of the murders, members of the Cogden clan chose to leave all their items at Glenshire, not wanting to go back to get anything after what had happened. So Duluth University opened the very authentic Glenshire House Mansion and Museum and its grounds to the public in 1980. For years, the House Museum enjoyed waves of visitors who loved the outside views, walking trails, gardens, and the absolutely gorgeous interior that showcased in detail how wealthy the Cogden family lived, as well as having its own murder mystery. It was quite a popular place to see and experience during the early years. However, in 2014, visits by the public had fallen nearly 2/3, and something had to be done, or the museum would have to close. As the old ways and rules weren't working, the Glenshire Interim Director, Dan Hartman, and his committee began to think outside of the traditional House Museum box and came up with the new creative ways to bring people back, as did many other historical house museums like Edith Wharton Estate, the Mount Haunted Houses. First thing to go were the velvet ropes that kept people away from the treasured antiques on display, which allowed visitors to get close enough to visually examine them. Photography was now allowed inside. To get the locals to come, live programming that included lectures of all kinds of historical topics, a discussion series, and musical concerts were offered interest to the public once again in Glenshire. This step away from traditional house museum culture caused some controversy at first. In 2014, Glenshire Interior Director Dan Hartman shared that the old ways weren't working, as limiting access curtailed the experiences that people wanted. Times had changed. Happily, these new creative ways worked. People wanted to experience a house as a house. In 2014, visits from tourists and locals jumped 19%, and there had been a steady flow ever since because of the new events planned every year. While they don't talk about the spectral ladies of the house or their murders, relatively new events for adults only, the 21+ flashlight tours was scheduled for October 25th and 26th. This started in 2021 and were so popular they were brought back every year. Some talking points was tour the dark mansion with a cup of courage. For those 21 or above, the cost of admission includes one alcoholic drink and a branded Glenshire flashlight tour pint glass with a sippy cup cover, so participants may drink their drinks with them. The spirit and her faithful companion Vilma are said to be restless, but take comfort in spending their afterlives together, enjoying the estate and activities of the living. Lights go on and off by themselves, like someone is inside the room despite the house being empty. The Cogdens' personal items have been known to travel around the mansion, winding up in areas not chosen by the living. Feelings of happiness and fun are felt in the rooms where the family spent time together. Sensitives can feel an unseen presence or two in the library, probably reading in comfortable chairs. A white mist has been seen perusing the bookshelves. And in the living room and hallways, a happy aura is felt here, lifting the living up. Unseen presences could sometimes be felt sitting in the living room. Shadows have been noticed in the living room and going up and down the hallways, going about their business. This staircase landing is a huge cold spot that has been reported by the living while standing on the landing of the staircase where Velma was murdered. In the bedrooms, Elizabeth's presence is felt in her bedroom. Both spirits have been seen standing in the window of Elizabeth's bedroom, and Velma's presence is also felt in her quarters. The boys' bedroom has a happy, light aura. But who is in the basement? A shadowy black figure hangs out in the basement. Perhaps that it's a maintenance man who loved his job while alive? And in the outside gardens, both spirits have been seen floating around the gardens and pathways. And activities of the living, both spirits have been felt in the foyer, greeting their visitors. Other times, they may listen to the lectures, discussions, and concerts from afar. For many years, staff and visitors have seen and felt these two spirits who are making the best of it. Sensitive people have felt their presences in various rooms and outside the gardens and buildings. No paranormal investigations have been allowed because people interested in the paranormal are not welcome. And this may upset Elizabeth and her nurse, who deserve to be left alone to enjoy their stay. Why would they be upset? Is it still haunted? Yes, indeed. There's no hard evidence to be shared. The number of sightings of these two spirits and sensing their unseen presences has become made believers of many of the living who think the two spirits are spending their afterlife in their favorite place. So anyway, this is located in Duluth, Minnesota. I actually grew up on this story about the haunting. So kind of interesting. Anyway, I'll find one more story to tell you guys, and then we'll go from there. All right, my final scary haunted place is the Griggs Mansion. The Griggs Mansion is located in St. Paul. It has the dubious reputation of being the most haunted house in St. Paul. This huge 4-story Victorian well-kept sandstone mansion has 24 rooms described as cavernous because of their high ceilings. Each floor has a landing and a staircase leading up to the next floor. Dark, beautiful woodwork can be found throughout the mansion. There is a large room just off the 4th floor landing that has a beautiful vast skylight that was installed in 1939 when the mansion was being used as an art school. Behind the mansion there is a comfortable carriage house. Large trees around the mansion provide shade, and a sandstone wall that surrounds the mansion and gives it privacy. It is privately owned by people who don't want to be bothered with ghost hunters, so please respect their privacy. The history of this location is in 1883, a wealthy household grocery businessman, Chauncey Griggs, built this lovely mansion, but lived in it only for 4 years, before moving on to greener pastures on the West Coast, where he expanded his business interests to include the lumber and transportation markets. Over its 100-plus years, the mansion has been a private residence and at one time was divided into apartments as well. Many families and individuals who moved in spent a lot of money on upkeep, furnishing, servants, and etc., but wound up leaving after only a few years. Also, as mentioned above, the mansion became an art school in 1939 and stayed there for 25 years until the new Arts and Science Center was built. Many students and teachers were glad that the new building was built because now they didn't have to share their school with seen and unseen presences. Love troubles have caused many a suicide. However, being dead doesn't cure a broken heart or anguish. One of the most strongly felt presences is that of a young maid who, in 1915, hung herself off the 4th floor landing, suffering from depression over an ended romance. Unfinished business can keep a spirit in this world. The gardener, while alive, who was an intense, fanatical worker, took great pride in keeping the gardens in magnificent shape, and would often use books in the mansion's well-stocked library to help him in his work. He may have died before he could finish the garden project. Former owners like to keep an eye on their former forever homes. At least 2 spectral owners are still keeping an eye on things. Spirits who have had a strong connection to a place in this world like to visit and stay in the afterlife. There is also a spirit of a teenage girl and a child apparition, both connected to the Greggs mansion. While a lot of supernatural activity seems to be centered around the 4th floor, many parts of the house have been visited by entities as well. While a lot of supernatural activity seems to be centered around the 4th floor, many parts of the house have been visited by entities as well. 6 or 7 entities have been felt, heard, and made their existence known by various means, and actually been seen throughout the years. The mansion's spiritual occupants are a young maid, a gardener, a child, a thin man in a black suit, and a teenager, Amy, and a Civil War general, perhaps Chauncey Griggs himself. The 7th sighting could have been any of the male apparitions, because only the head of an unclear male apparition appears. The spirit of the suicidal maid. Earlier in the 20th century, she appeared to be a young servant and a butler at the 4th floor hallway. Her presence has been felt strongly by many people throughout the years. She is perhaps one of the entities that climbs the stairs to the 4th floor to her unseen rope on the landing there. While climbing the staircase and standing in the hall as well, people during the day have felt a sense of foreboding, anxiety, and feelings of distress that could be quite strong, as 3 newsmen found it one night when they came to gather information for a series on ghosts. After setting up camp in a big room on the top floor, armed with 2 cameras, one regular and one with infrared, aimed at the well-lighted top of the stairs in 4th floor hall, and a tape recorder, the men each went out to the hall, but scooted back to the room when they were filled with an overwhelming sense of fear. They heard heavy footsteps coming up those stairs. One brave newsman went through the hall to the stairway, and though he saw nothing, he felt a strong presence on the stairs. They left in a hurried manner together down the stairs, feeling nothing was worth staying a night there. In the spirit of the thin man, perhaps a former gentleman who was an owner or a teacher at the school, dressed in a black suit and a top hat. This apparition visits people in many rooms of the mansion, but 2 eyewitnesses' accounts are given. Dr. Delmer Kolb, in the early 1950s, joined the art school's teaching staff and moved into the front basement apartment in the mansion. He awoke one night by the pressure of 2 dead cold fingers on his forehead and found himself in a cold sweat. After turning on the light, he saw a blue flash that disappeared. 2 nights later, he was again wakened to find a clear, detailed apparition of a man dressed in a black suit and a top hat, who was standing at the foot of his bed. At first, this alarmed Dr. Kolb. He thought it was a prowler dressed in costume, but realized it was a ghost when the apparition dissolved into a brick wall. And later, in 1964, another man bought the mansion with the idea of using the place as both an office and his home. He published books on the occult. In 1967, the same man was working at the desk in the library when he stopped to take a break, and he saw visually in the doorway of the library a thin, long-faced man with white hair, dressed in a black suit, who was studying him. The apparition faded away after about 30 seconds. The spirit of the gardener, who is thought to be Charles Wade, various people have heard an unseen presence frantically flipping through the books. Perhaps this distressed entity died before he can finish his latest garden project and feels he has unfinished business. A child apparition. In 1959, 2 college students moved into the front basement apartment. One night, something woke up one student who was usually a very sound sleeper. He looked up and saw the head of a child floating above his head. The spirit of Amy. When a St. Paul spiritualist medium by the name of Roma Harris came to visit the mansion, he felt the shadowy presence of a teenage girl who calls herself Amy. She had many happy moments playing at the mansion's piano. She died young and perhaps hangs around the mansion where she was happy, making music. Or perhaps she lived during the art school days of the mansion. And the spirit of a Civil War general, perhaps Chauncey Griggs himself. Roma also saw a Civil War office dressed in a general blue uniform with the gold trim. As the original owner, Chauncey Griggs was a Civil War officer, and it is theorized that his entity is Chauncey, who likes to keep an eye on his mansion.
Many unexplained but typical incidents common in haunted houses have been reported, though no specific entity has been found to be responsible for the noises. Annoying behavior that makes the living uncomfortable or feeling befuddled. Windows that have been firmly closed, even nailed shut, have been found open in the morning. Footfalls have been heard traveling up and down the staircases. Shadowy presences have been seen. Unsuspecting students who rented the apartments have been shaken awake to find an undistinguished apparition floating above their beds. Doors open and close by themselves. Rasping coughs have been heard coming from empty rooms. Light bulbs suddenly shatter, and paper bags have been known to jump off the shelves, jump across the floor. People in the mansion have felt presences walk by them. Some of the presences happen to appreciate art. While working in the art studio room with the skylight on the top floor, students have felt presences peering over their shoulder to get a good look at their drawings in progress, perhaps studying with interest the students' efforts. Well, is the place still haunted? Yes, just ask the St. Paul Pioneer Press. While investigating this widely known haunted house, they got first-hand confirmation when they themselves came in contact with ghostly manifestations. Alright, so I guess that pretty much ends my ghost stories. Those are the 3 that I am very familiar with, and so I had to look them up. Well, I believe in ghosts. I do believe in ghosts. I don't always believe in these published haunted locations, especially like a museum, because I always feel like maybe they drum that up to try to get people to come, because it is big business doing haunted tours. But outside of that, so anyway, I'm continuing on. Clearly, I am working on the kitchen. We made the chapel. I can tell you that there's going to be one more, or at least 2 more episodes. One where I do the rooms and decorate that way. Then there's going to be one more after that where I make it haunted. And that should wrap it up. There is going to be one quick video where I just kind of run through and do, like, it's probably going to be a couple minutes long, where I just do the after tour and not the before tour. So, yeah.